suma na sosobonarra meeshaa diinaa ta'uun guuttatanii gara bilisomne jedhu waayama hin argatanii nurra bilisummaa dhugaa ta'uu keenya faa meeshaa jira. Obida gamte nuda gubarbada maranya tajete garana paduda dira pawite sobana waiwaita sabon maganke orida kedarda korumbenne kanalla yalla lalle bollole objalati lalte kanu bande korumbenne kanalla yalla lalle bollole objalati
Akkam jirtu dhaggeeffattoota keenya, kun sagantaa addaa arraata biyyoolessa Oromiyaa kan afaan Ingiliziidhaan isiniif qophaa'edha. Har'a Dubbi-Himaa Idil-Addunyaa kan ta'e Jaal Odaa Tarbii qabadheen isiniif dhiyaate. Nu waliin turaa. Hello, Mr. Odaa Tarbii. Thank you for joining us today.
It is my pleasure.
To start off, recently there was a groundbreaking announcement that OLA and TDF had entered into an alliance. What was the process that led to this alliance?
It was a long process. It required extensive internal debate as well as consultation with the Oromo public in all corners of Oromia, as well as the diaspora. Contrary to what the government mouthpieces would want you to believe, there was general consensus that some sort of agreement, not just with TDF and the Tigrayan people, but with all groups currently fighting the Abiy regime for their self-determination, would be beneficial to the struggle. We took this as a green light to move ahead with talks, which began just over a month ago now. But before I move on, I need to clarify something, the word alliance. That term was used by the Associated Press, but that was not what was said by our Commander-in-Chief, Jaal. At this stage, it is still an agreement. It is an agreement to share intelligence and coordinate militarily. However, just as Jaal stated, this is the first step to the building of a broader political coalition. Despite the lack of news coverage, the war being waged by Abiy is not just on Oromos and Tigrays. The Benishangul, which are the Barta people, the Gumuz, the Kimant, the Agao, the Sidama, the Walaita, Sheko, Konso, and many more. They have all been viciously targeted by this dictatorship just for upholding the principle of self-determination.
Okay, was the decision made for tactical reasons in regards to the war, or is part of a larger strategy based on common goals and principles?
It was not merely a tactical move. It's the first step towards building a strategic coalition, not just with the TDF, but with several other pro-self-determination groups with which we are currently in talks. Okay. What brings us together is not merely the current military situation. It is mutual agreement on certain points that we have discussed. Namely, the importance of the principle of self-determination, the importance of enforcing human rights, the necessity of fully implementing the 1995 Constitution. Aside from that, we all came to the conclusion, judging from the scenario, judging from what we are seeing right now, that the biggest obstacle to peace and democracy in the region is the Abiy regime, and that its removal will be of utmost importance.
Okay, and many people are wondering how the OLA could trust the TPLF after what happened in 1991. What would you say to them? What would you say to those people?
As I mentioned before, this agreement is not just with TPLF or TDF. However, it should also be noted that we have not forgotten the EPRDF era. Many of our troops they were victims of state-sanctioned violence during that time. But we are also cognizant of the fact that TPLF was merely one element of that dictatorship. And the element that most directly affected the Oromo people, namely OPDO, is still in power today. They managed to avoid accountability and justice because our people extended an olive branch to them in 2018, and OPDO decided to disregard that olive branch. and decided to continue to oppress our people. Today, under its new name Prosperity Party, OPDO has allied itself with the ideological opposite of the Oromo people. They have allied themselves with the camp that regularly espouses deep hatred, not just for the Kero movement that put OPDO into power, but for the Oromo people as a whole. In the last year, the Tigrayan people paid a heavy price for the mistakes of TPLF. Just as the PP era has been a time for suffering for Oromos, it has been a time for suffering for the Tigrayan people as well. It has been a time of suffering for several other nationalities in the country as well. So we all have a mutual interest in removing the biggest obstacle to peace and democracy in the region, to ensure the safety and security of our people.
Okay. Another question. Is there a difference between this alliance, or as you said, a disagreement, and the infamous Oromara alliance of the 2018?
From the very beginning, the Oromo-Amara alliance was always destined to fail in the long term. It was purely a tactical move. There was no consideration of any broader strategy. It was an alliance built purely out of the concept of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. There was always zero ideological overlap between the two camps. There was zero consensus on interpretation of history. There was always going to be a reckoning based on these differences. And that is what we have seen destabilize the country for the last 3 years. Perhaps, maybe, if PP had given more credence to the success of the transition, the success of democracy flourishing in the country, rather than on preserving its own power, perhaps then it could have fostered some kind of understanding through dialogue between these two camps. Instead, it chose to manipulate those two camps to preserve itself. Instead, Abiy and Koachi, they sided with the camp with both the cultural and economic dominance and chose to completely sideline its Oromo allies. The OLA, for its part, from the very beginning, we never believed in the viability of the Oromara alliance because we could see that it was an artificial creation based on short-term goals. In fact, there is more ideological overlap between Oromos and Somalis, Tigray, Sidamas, than there was ever any overlap in the Oromara alliance. So it's not the same, it's very different.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. There has been a lot of news about the OLA scoring military victories. What can you tell us about the military situation in Oromia?
In the beginning of this month, the Oromo Liberation Army launched 4 concurrent operations in all corners of Oromia. The objective was to dislodge the remaining government forces encamped in these areas and take control of major roads and then proceed to the next stage. In the western zone, there is Operation Lagasawagi. In the southern zone, there is Operation Elamokiltu. In the central zone, there is Operation Taddaseberu. In the southeastern zone, there is Operation Nedi Gammada. Now, so far, these operations have been a resounding success. We have captured several important roads and towns, as well as neutralized several military camps that had been oppressing the people in that area. And due to our successes, the government recently found it necessary to reinstitute a network blackout in Western Oromia and increase enforcement of curfew, which has been very detrimental to the well-being of civilians. The thinking of the government is that this will somehow be able enough to stop our advance, but that has not happened. Our forces are continuing to liberate land and push back government control. And this trajectory is one that we're not going to fall back on.
Okay, if Abiy's government is overthrown right now, what will be the next step for Oromo Liberation Army?
The next step will be the establishment of an inclusive transitional government that will be established by the multinational coalition that will include OLA, as well as any other group that believe in the pursuit of political objectives through democracy. The transitional government's sole task will be to pave the way towards free and fair election. We will not see this rise of a one-man situation as we have seen with Abiy. On our end, we will continue to work on securing a free and fair referendum so that the Oromo people can finally have the opportunity to determine for themselves whether or not they wish to remain within Ethiopia. And whatever the results of that referendum, we will respect. Our goal is just to give the people the choice.
Okay, Mr. Odaa, we've concluded our interview for today.
We appreciate you a lot. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you on this channel again next time. Thank you.